Floating Hats.
Hello, we're starting the podcast Floating Heads Against Something. And today, Sergey and I will talk about trust. How important is it? What significant problems can arise if it's completely lost? And how do you continue to live in a world where you can trust less and less? We came up with this podcast in a rather interesting format. Actually, you can't see it, but we're sitting here in strange green suits, pretending that everything is normal. And we thought that just doing a regular podcast where people sit in a beautiful studio with great lighting is no longer interesting. A lot of people have already done that. So why not do things a little differently? Plus, there are people who actually don't watch video podcasts, but just listen to them. So we decided to do it this way. Our heads will be floating around the whole time. And you can sit, listen, and watch our heads. And I hope an interesting discussion. In addition to that, we'll have a floating bingo. If you keep a very close eye on the video, you'll definitely see various interesting characters appearing all around. Please collect them in the comments. Whoever is the very first person to collect the complete set of characters in the comments will receive a slap in the mail. So shall we begin? My name is Mike Shishkin. I am the proud founder and creative director of the Kidults agency, a dedicated co-founder of several innovative startups, and today I have specifically invited Serioja to have an important conversation about the crucial topic of trust. Serioja, tell us about yourself.
Thanks for the trust, Mish.
You're welcome.
Yes, and I'm Sergi Safronov. Sergi is in Catalan.
In Catalan.
Yes. I'm the founder of Impulse, a media outlet about business and the economy in Spain. And together with Mish, there's also the Impulse Awards. We created an award for entrepreneurs, also in Spain. It's a kind of continuation.
I decided to talk about why I decided to talk about trust today. It seems to me that this particular concept is becoming incredibly important right now. But we don't truly realize its significant role because we tend to perceive trust as some kind of fundamental and inherent value, as something that is simply taken for granted and not deeply considered. And just recently, I watched a video interview with Yuval Harari, and in the context of the changes happening in society now, he highlighted the problem of the loss of trust. This is deeply connected to the prevailing political situation as well, and accordingly, more and more populist leaders are steadily coming to power, and no one even truly expects them to genuinely fulfill the numerous promises they make anymore. On the other hand, we now live in an era of pervasive post-truth and sophisticated deepfakes, and we no longer even precisely know what we can reliably trust, whether a particular video or piece of information is truly real or not.
Our present.
Our present, yes, these are our real heads. And we can't always trust. And, well, trust is actually a very fundamental thing. I could probably say it's the essential cornerstone of human civilization, because if we're not entirely sure that money is truly real, then we simply don't trust money. We don't trust the entire financial system, and consequently, no economy can effectively function. If we don't deeply trust governments, then we inherently don't trust the very laws. If we genuinely don't trust international organizations, and more broadly speaking, if we don't place our trust in the individuals and communities around us, then everything inevitably collapses into some kind of primitive, chaotic society. And in fact, so much of our daily lives is built entirely on trust, but we often just take it completely for granted, and that's precisely why there's a significant risk of potentially losing it. What are your thoughts and opinions about this important topic?
To me, it's obvious. It's like when people get together and enjoy a drink, the very first thing they often say is, do you truly trust me? Because they actually realize they've lost a significant bit of their usual control and in some important way have to implicitly trust the other person, that if something were to go wrong, that particular person could genuinely help them out, ensuring they get home safely and securely. I think it's kind of an obvious thing. I truly do not see that this particular concept has ever gone out of relevance because, well, any significant and meaningful relationship is fundamentally built upon the undeniable fact that we actually earn this essential trust from each other. Well, I genuinely believe that trust is very much like some kind of intrinsic meter or perhaps a deeply ingrained gauge that is inherently built into every single person, much like, a system of accumulating points.
A trust credit.
Yes, a trust credit. You sort of accumulate this credit and then something gets deducted from this account, really. And at some point, it can happen that this credit goes into the negative, right? And at that moment, you start looking at this person and thinking, so what is he really about? You start paying more attention to him, listening and watching more closely. And it truly seems to me that this is an automatic inherent mechanism, and it's precisely what profoundly allows marketers, shrewd politicians, and indeed people who truly know how to subtly press on delicate human traits and vulnerabilities to skillfully create the powerful illusion of trust, because in stark reality, we can genuinely trust only a very limited, intimate circle of individuals. Well, honestly, that's precisely how it is, in every sense. Because everyone else is very dangerous.
Two laughing heads in the space. Yes, I think on the one hand we only trust people close to us, but on the other hand it's absolutely essential for us to trust someone every day. Oh, by the way, I have a great bar not far from my house. We go there from time to time. To have a glass of wine. And there, something very interesting often happens with the bill. They almost never get it right for us. Sometimes they overcharge, sometimes they undercharge. Once they charged us for an extra glass of wine, we pointed it out, they apologized and corrected the bill. Everything was great. Then the next time, they charged us for less wine. But the time after that, they made a mistake again. And I realized on one hand, I generally trust this place because I understand they're not doing it out of malice and have no intention. Yeah. But on the other hand, I always check the bill every single time. So I guess there can be different levels here.
That brings us right to the topic of reputation. Reputation is...
And what is reputation?
Reputation is the sum of your interactions with someone, right? In other words, it's what you have left from your experience of interacting, not just say how you want to appear to someone or, to look good, right? And you've never interacted with that brand or person before, but when you actually have an experience with them, like with this company or this bar, you know what to expect from them. And this bar already has a well-established reputation that people truly count on.
That's friendly, but a bit careless.
Yeah. So, of course, depending on that reputation, you choose a certain strategy. You go there for entertainment, but not to save money, or because, you might get tricked there, for example, and you could end up with some kind of unpleasant feeling. And the next time you're choosing a bar, that will definitely play a role.
For me, I think it's important whether it was a one-time or recurring mistake or just carelessness, which is a factor.
That's already regular carelessness.
Regular carelessness.
And then those points, they start ticking off one by one.
Yes, but for me, for example, this is interesting because for each person, there's probably a different system of weights for various factors. It's important whether the deception was intentional or unintentional. If they made a mistake, I'd call it careless. So next time, I'll double-check, understanding that it's my responsibility to verify things additionally, but I won't think badly of them, and I'll come back to them again. If I realize that they deliberately deceived me, then I definitely won't go back there ever again.
Well, listen, still. So either you get used to it, the fact that, for example, you don't really like it, you clearly don't like being shortchanged. So it creates an uncomfortable situation for you, right? Sometimes you get what you're supposed to, sometimes you don't. You didn't come here to have to think about this at all. You came to enjoy spending time with your friends, right? To have a drink and so on. But when this little thing keeps bothering you all the time, either you get used to it, but we live in Spain.
And we do get used to it.
And we get used to a lot of things like that, right? I mean, it would seem that there are some things like living in a big city like Moscow, or it's hard to get used to them. It feels kind of arrogant, But in Spain, you get used to a lot of things, and you can get used to this too.
Yeah, so for me, this kind of unconscious carelessness is just an inherent part of the cultural experience, and it's absolutely not a problem for me personally, not at all. But yeah, I guess I can imagine if, say, an airline overcharged me, or if there was some more... Or even a large grocery store, which I still clearly see as some kind of complex system.
It's good that you mentioned airlines. There are low-cost carriers like Ryanair and many others that behave quite terribly. You know that, right? And they've actually turned these significant inconveniences into a core part of their brand.
Yeah.
And people still continue to fly with these particular airlines because they inherently know, well, that's just precisely how it is, isn't it?
But it's a delicate matter. It affects their reputation, and many people get angry, complaining they weren't allowed on with a suitcase whose wheels didn't fit.
They advertise the airline.
Yeah. And they do this knowingly because, yes, it caused a lot of noise. But now everyone knows that the airline is inexpensive. As a result, they got more exposure. And here's the question of managing that reputation.
And what's more, this particular way they save on informing passengers because everyone universally knows you just can't get through with a suitcase that's too big.
Yeah. And overall, this can be managed.
Yeah.
And they don't need the reputation of a company that you can trust 100%. They need a reputation more like, a company where you can fly cheaply. That's it. And that's what they are betting on.
Here we're talking about reputation.
Different kinds of reputation, yes. Well, I mean, reputation isn't, it's just a numerical value. It's not. It can be quite different. It can be inherently good or inherently bad. And at the very same time,
both beneficial, not beneficial.
Beneficial and not beneficial. The same things can be beneficial for some and not for others.
So having the reputation of a good boy doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be beneficial.
You're a good boy.
You would know better.
I think it's also quite interesting to talk about the concept of trust in the broader context of brands and personal brands, a significant topic I've been working on a lot lately, and we've certainly discussed it together as well. And so I think that trust is actually the key function of any company's brand. Because at some point I started to wonder, well, the purpose of a brand for the business itself is more or less clear. But what is the brand for the consumer? Because anything really only exists when it's mutually needed by someone, right? So what is the brand for the consumer? And actually, it seems that this is the key. Trust is the key function. That is, a brand is needed so that you don't have to read the fine print every time, don't have to double check everything. You want to trust this brand, you try it once, remember what it's like, and then you trust it and save a lot of time when evaluating or choosing, not having to pick from 10 identical products every time. But instead you have someone you've already chosen, someone you've decided on. And here I started thinking, why has the topic of personal branding become such a hot topic lately? And in general, if we think about the big corporations that exist in the world today, almost all of them have some kind of founder or CEO who is the face of the brand. Well, there absolutely has to be someone like that. They need to have their own specific agenda, and through them, people learn much more about the brand. I think there's a big, very long-term trend of this trust in companies becoming blurred, because companies can broadcast their own values, but we trust those values much less now. We all understand, everyone has already encountered all these marketing tricks and realizes that the values a brand promotes might sound appealing to you, but the company doesn't always actually stick to them. And that's why people, in search of this trust, there is a demand for trust, go and try to figure out who is actually behind the company in order to regain that trust. Because when you look at a person, they might also have some kind of constructed concept, certain proven things that come into play. But if they are active, especially now when all social networks are open and a person is almost always and everywhere present transparently in the digital space, you still get a sense of what kind of person they are. And by understanding what kind of person they are, you start to understand the principles by which they build their company and what the product will be like, the one I will use. And here, it seems to me, that's actually why so many personal brands are emerging now. It's just that many people interpret them simply as, well, you need to do something, gain some popularity, promote yourself somehow. But I think it's very important to understand that this is about trust. People come for trust, not just for popularity. What do you think, based on your experience?
Well, honestly, maybe I'll sound a bit like a conservative, but I don't see anything particularly innovative about this, because if you take the word brand itself, it means a mark, right? That is, it's what people used to put on products they made many, many centuries ago, thereby marking that this is my quality, this is my promise. I promise that this product will last a long time, that it is beautiful, reliable, and its price is fair.
I stand behind quality.
Yes. Well, I always like to say that for me, a brand is a promise. That is, it's about keeping promises. But essentially...
A promise or an obligation?
Well, a promise.
But not an obligation.
No, it's a promise. Because obligations arise at the moment of purchase. That's when it becomes an obligation. At first, the brand itself communicates this promise. I haven't bought anything yet, I haven't interacted yet. So it's like I'm promising to be reliable and good, but then you buy something and it falls apart. And the promise is not kept. And that's exactly where the mechanics of building a reputation come in. So if it happens once, you might give it another chance or you might not. But if it keeps happening, then it's all about reputation. You can promise anything you truly want, but your reputation is essentially worthless. And that's precisely why the undeniable fact that we've come back to this particular situation now is basically a direct response to the pervasive clutter and manipulative tactics frequently used by large corporations, significant companies that exist, well, essentially, in this challenging situation. Artificial intelligence is a separate topic we need to discuss, but if we talk about the simple mechanics that have existed for a long time, wherever there is dishonesty or inauthenticity, people always pay more attention not to the team or the number of people, but to individuals, right? Or to the leader, which is always important. But here too, we know that a leader can, so to speak, be propped up and conditions can be created to make them look better. Absolutely, because in reality, you're not going to just run into the leader of a big corporation or a country on the street.
Well, you might run into them on Twitter.
But who actually runs that Twitter account, right? We don't know, do we? There could be a large team of scriptwriters, authors behind it. Although, of course, it's still a space of freedom where people can actually figure out whether Trump is writing those tweets himself or not. We could also talk separately about the topic of artificial intelligence in this context.
Or figure out who is writing when and where.
Yes, that's precisely the kind of situation that actually protects us, just like the fundamental fact that society is built entirely on trust. And if we were to discuss a specific situation, a truly striking and compelling example where a personal brand really becomes very important and significant, it's the Weihun, those Chinese bloggers, right? That is, they essentially make up the entire ecosystem in China. All sales go through them, right? So one single Weihun sells cars, swim trunks, and practically anything else you could possibly imagine, truly. Why? Because the Chinese don't trust all the government propaganda, all the media.
The whole system.
The whole system. They know.
And that's why they don't trust companies either. I think for people, the state and corporations are more or less the same. So any individual who stands in opposition to a corporation always inspires more trust.
And if an individual or a Weihun does something wrong, they can lose everything very quickly, right? So if a large corporation does something wrong, they can just come out and openly say, our CEO, Mr. X, was an idiot. We've promptly fired him, and now we're all squeaky clean. But for an individual, you simply can't just resign someone. You can't really play that game of saying, it wasn't me, it was that guy over there.
Well, yeah, because that's you, that's who you are. Exactly. So if you're selling something significant through your personal brand, then your own personal stake in it is even higher. On the one hand, you gain more trust and credibility, but on the other hand, the inherent risks are also higher. And so, well, if we take, for example, Musk, we can see how his position changes from one day to the next.
It's dropping every day.
It changes every single day. But how does that affect the corporation itself? If before going back to reputation, he had the reputation of a technological genius, whatever he touched turned out well, and even if he invested just a little in some company, it would immediately take off, because everyone understood. If he saw potential in it, then it was going to be great, a great project. But now we see that when he takes on something, sometimes it doesn't work out, sometimes he messes up.
He's only human.
He's only human. And on the one hand, that's interesting, but on the other hand, that reputation of being uncompromising, that whatever he touches will definitely succeed, is gone now. Let's switch
to our absolute favorite topic.
Controversy number 2, AI.
AI, yes.
Yes. So in what context do we actually want to discuss AI? Of course, the world will, and already is, and already has changed. Even in the time we've been talking, it's changed again. And in the context of trust, I think there's a very important question here that we don't always fully understand right now, because AI really simplifies our lives in many areas, in many aspects. And we don't always understand the value of trust, once again. I keep coming back to this topic, which in the case of AI is gradually becoming blurred. Because today, well, what happened this week? This week, I encountered 2 situations where someone was given feedback on a text they had written. Dude, you could have put in a bit more effort and not use ChatGPT. And in both cases, these were different people, said, but I wrote this myself, it wasn't GPT. So people have already lost so much trust. If someone wrote something before, like in the past, if something was published in a newspaper or a quote from a person, you would assume that they actually did it. Now you can write anything you want. Anyone can write something, even AI can write compelling and high-quality content directly from your official channel. And now you just don't know anymore. Did this person actually write it or not? And on one hand, we make our lives much easier when AI helps us with certain texts. But on the other hand, we lose something important, and people just stop noticing it altogether. There's a huge devaluation of values and trust happening.
That's the price we pay for all this. As a historian, you also understand that in the past, people lived in villages and didn't need to trust anyone beyond the small group of people, maybe someone from a neighboring village. So this problem didn't exist back then. Trust existed only within your personal circle, and now that everything has become so global, so information-driven and vast, this is the price we pay for it. Basically, we always pay for comfort or for something fast with something else.
I just want to give an example. Books, for instance. Recently, I came across a post, and the person wrote, "I wrote a book." I'm thinking, why did he suddenly decide to do this? He never wrote before, and now he's written a book. I already assume, of course, that he wrote this particular book with a significant amount of help from advanced artificial intelligence.
Can I ask what's wrong with that? I mean, what's the danger here? So
The danger for me, okay, let's say I am a potential reader, right? Here's how I see it. The way I see it is that if I spend my time, invest my time to buy and read this book, I'll just get a set of cliches and average information that I already know.
About artificial intelligence.
Well, overall, I think artificial intelligence can do everything at an average level. So if I need to do something at an average level, and sometimes an average level is way better than doing nothing, then it's a great tool. And here's where I'm afraid that I'll want to find out what this person really thinks, but in reality, maybe there aren't any of their own thoughts there at all.
Look, this person you're talking about, the one who wrote the book, do they have a good brand and reputation?
I don't really know them that well. I can't be sure about that.
Right. Now imagine if, for example, I released a book about reputation tomorrow. Like tomorrow or in a few days. No, just hypothetically, what would you think about that? You'd probably also think that there's no way I wrote that book in a week using artificial intelligence.
No, well, I think you spent a long time writing it because you have a reputation. We've talked about this topic before. I know that this topic is something that matters to you.
That's exactly the crucial point. If you truly trust this person and they release a book in a week, you understand, yes, you clearly know what's genuinely behind it. But if I release one in a week, you'd probably just think I extensively used artificial intelligence to automate some of my personal notes or perhaps my own original material, right? I think...
But you know what I actually mean here? What I mean is that for me, in the past, if someone wrote a book, it was a certain indicator of their expertise in the subject, right? Because there's a level where I just speak somewhere or I work on my own, then I start speaking somewhere.
That's the reputation of a book, I think.
Yes, that's the reputation of a book.
Sort of.
And then it comes out, yes. And for me, a book used to be a kind of marker that a person was deeply immersed in the subject. Now, a book is no longer that kind of marker. And I don't even know about this person, whether he wrote it himself. Maybe he spent 7 years writing it every day before this. I don't know him personally. And now, finally, the book has come out. But because these markers and authorities, the proof that something is truly valuable, are becoming fewer and fewer, they're gradually fading away. And here I think a very important point is what I already mentioned, that any artificial intelligence can generate a pretty decent average result.
Misha, please, let's not blame everything on artificial intelligence. I'm serious. Well, here's a not even that recent example. Body Shop, you know that brand? It went under. It also started organic, like everything was great. Then it turned out it wasn't organic and everything was produced. This was even before AI.
No, that's not what I mean.
People have lied, are lying, and will continue to lie. And our security system has not been cancelled at all. It remains fully active. It has to work. And if it doesn't work, the whole world falls apart.
Yeah, it's just that the established habits we used to have for truly perceiving things are gradually changing, and we really need to develop new ones and look for fresh, reliable markers. For example, there are some well-known brands that we inherently trust even though we don't fully know how their intricate production is organized. Maybe we just like the way they communicate. Like, I don't know, Decathlon, for instance. Yeah, it's great.
Very cheap.
Good quality, convenient, fast, reasonable price. We don't have to overpay, and we love them for that. And then it turns out that they use child labor in their factories and so on. And now you're faced with a moral dilemma. And here I think what I truly meant wasn't even that we should just blame everything on artificial intelligence, but rather that we genuinely need, and it certainly seems like there will be, a steadily growing demand for authenticity from companies. And this authenticity, this humanity, if you can call it that, it comes out precisely in certain quirks, in certain oddities. So basically, how do you recognize it? Sorry, let me go back to artificial intelligence for a moment. If a message is generated by artificial intelligence, there won't be any mistakes in it.
But what worries you about that? That's what I can't figure out. Well, let's say, look, if a person stole content, they could have stolen it before. If this artificial intelligence generated good content, what's the problem? If it helped you generate good content, what's the problem?
What if it helped me generate bad content? You read it and thought I really think that way, and I didn't even reread it.
Well, then that's just stupid. That's your reputation. Well, it's the same story, the exact same story. I'm telling you, your score with me will go down. It's your responsibility to work with artificial intelligence. So if you come in and create a poor product with artificial intelligence, one that doesn't reflect your individuality at all, you didn't fine-tune it, you didn't figure out how to get the most out of it for your own needs. Again, that's your responsibility, that's your brand. In other words, essentially, to a large extent, the ability to work with artificial intelligence is also part of your reputation.
Well, absolutely.
I mean, if you deny that you use it at all, that you write all your text yourself, sooner or later people will start to get suspicious too, because everyone uses it for one thing or another, right? So, for example, if you write your book, your thoughts, your experiences, to speed up the process using artificial intelligence, and you mention this at the beginning and say, I wrote this book in such and such a way, that will be honest and transparent, and people will say to you, well done.
Well, of course, my point here is that, as I already mentioned, any more or less average quality result starts to be perceived by people as not genuine and as something the person didn't really put any effort into. And for me, accordingly, my personal idea, which came to me quite recently and has been developing, is that now simply delivering an average quality result has become truly and significantly devalued because everyone will inevitably think that.
I get what you're worried about. Now I understand, I get it, yes, I agree. So the stakes are getting higher. So what can you actually make money on, right? So for a creative person, if before they could achieve a certain level of quality through their own dedicated effort and time, now they often have to really surpass even their own previous established level. That is, they have to come up with a much higher, more profound level of creativity. Is that right?
Well, yes, either creativity or authenticity. You could call it different things here. But it's about having distinctiveness, something that sets you apart from the ordinary. It seems to me this is one of the things, at least that's how I define it for myself, because on one hand, I look at it as someone who helps businesses, and on the other, as a consumer playing different roles, wearing different hats. I realize that as a consumer, I'm starting to value more and more those things where I see some kind of oddity, some kind of...
Well, I've already said on every single podcast I've been on that my absolute favorite and most profound quote from Viktor Frankl is, "To be is to be different."
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, I think this only adds more weight to that idea now. And it seems to me that your business is actually built around this very concept. You actually help a person, if it's a personal brand, for example, or an entire company to truly stand out. That's precisely what it's all about, isn't it? You look much deeper. It's something no ChatGPT, even with its advanced machine vision capabilities, could ever truly see, right? You look at it in a human way, don't you? And you find those things that are truly unique and bring them out, right? And that's the most interesting part, I think, isn't it? And if before everything had to follow some standard universal design, now you can even have a little fun with things like heads, right? And sooner or later, this particular development might even become a significant and widespread trend.
Well, I think this will become the new normal. Yeah. Because before, you'd look at the entire field, and if someone did something at least reasonably well, you could already effectively work with them, since in some specific areas, everything else was just much lower in overall quality. But now this fundamental quality standard will significantly rise, and there will be even more demand for something truly lively, something genuinely real. And since we'll be increasingly surrounded by all this artificially generated stuff, content, videos, photos, anything and everything at all, it seems like there will be a much greater and more significant demand for something truly human, authentic, unusual, and even quite strange.
Well, it certainly seems to me that in general, the demand for quality people in every sense, professionals with whom you can communicate effectively, will only continue to grow, and people will readily pay good money for this.
Absolutely, yes.
Because
the problem is that the demand for truly very high quality people will significantly increase, and conversely, for some mechanical, physical problems, the need will also grow. It's precisely like what they often discuss in development, specifically within the IT industry. It's the persistent problem of juniors because senior specialists are critically needed. But how can you become a senior specialist if juniors and middles aren't needed by anyone?
Education?
Yes. So what happens is, if you get some education now and start entering the profession through practice, you experience gradual growth. That is, at first you do simple tasks, earn little money, learn, then take on more and more complex tasks, and eventually you reach that level. So your entry into the market can already be at a fairly low level with low demand and simple tasks. And you gradually build your competence in a spiral. But now this entire segment is being covered by AI, and your value will only be recognized if you already have a high level of expertise. How can you immediately become highly skilled from scratch without any practice?
Well, I think that's exactly where education comes in. Education will change. So it's quite possible that all truly decent people will eventually end up making a living from education. In this broader sense, the information business is also very much like a kind of ongoing testing hypothesis. Why was there demand for it? Because it's also education. It can be high quality, low quality, fraudulent, or not fraudulent. But the point is that reality itself is testing different forms of how this will happen. And I think that action-based education or action learning will become more and more popular. But actually, even all the universities are already restructuring, right? Schools, on the other hand, are still, let's say, citadels of the conservative approach. And of course, the process there is more about the child's socialization. But when it comes to professional things, I truly think those will simply change. And perhaps, so to speak, Kidults will have their very own university, and Kidults will be paid money in order to, ultimately, to become more like you. I actually think that working in the future will be a privilege, really. That is, for those people who want to develop intellectually, who want to achieve something, who want to create something beyond the ordinary. Let's be honest, such people are still not the majority.
Not the majority.
And so, well, most people will, if we were to make a political forecast once again, receive this unconditional basic income and consequently choose not to work at all, perhaps even for an extended period of time.
Well, in fact, this already exists in one way or another through benefits and so on.
Yeah, and that's precisely why working will actually become a significant privilege for those individuals who genuinely desire to work, and there will be these kinds of specialized universities and so on. So, if a person is completely satisfied with some absolute minimum, large corporations will very easily take care of that. Believe me. We've all seen those science fiction movies.
No, absolutely. I think regarding the concept of basic income, it seems to me that this is a very particular and significant period. You could certainly say that with the advent of advanced automation and artificial intelligence, it's a kind of new form of slavery. Not in the sense that we'll start exploiting each other, but rather in the form of ancient Greek civilization, where why did it develop and progress so much and achieve such truly great things that we still admire and study today? Because people had a considerable amount of free time. Each of them had 2 or 3 slaves who diligently took care of various different things. Someone expertly managed your entire wardrobe, someone went to the bustling market, someone worked your fertile fields, and as a direct result, you had a significant amount of time left to leisurely walk around, deeply reflect, and engage in meaningful discussions just like we're doing right now. On the one hand, we are recording this very podcast, and on the other hand, we ourselves.
Let's reflect.
We reflect, we think, we come to some new ideas. Here. And so it seems to me the energy will shift there into something like this, into more creative, thoughtful activity.
Yes, I think so. And in principle, this is exactly the task of the education system, to foster critical thinking and so on. Maybe these sound like general words, but in reality, that's exactly what gives you the ability to avoid, well, not when someone is already trying to outright deceive you, right? But rather those ordinary scams. You click on a link and end up without your money or something like that.
Well, there's an industry there too.
The industry is working there as well.
There's an entire industry dedicated to catching scammers too. Here, I think, there's also a truly interesting perspective to consider. When people became accustomed to working diligently every single day just to earn their daily bread, and then, over time, bread became much more readily accessible, incredibly cheap, and so on. And now we spend a huge amount of time and money on things like working out, going to the gym, and so on, because our bodies need physical activity. Otherwise, we don't feel well since we no longer need to run for a long time just to get food. And I think the same thing will happen with intellectual activity, because a lot of things will become much easier for us intellectually. And so, in order to keep our brains engaged so they don't stagnate and we stay sane for a long time, there will be a big industry, just like the current fitness industry, something like a brain fitness industry. That's what I think.
Well, I think it basically already exists in a very real way. I mean, that's truly our community, right? And what you've also started as well, like your fantastic club and the engaging workshops you consistently run. In other words, you're creating your own kind of living neural network. You're involving people who are close to you in spirit, in reputation, right? And with them, you kind of create these exchanges, right? So you connect with them somehow, and you effectively build your own professional network, right? And that's also a kind of a complete answer. It's a network that's no less powerful than artificial intelligence. And there will simply be more demand for this, meaning that some mechanical tasks will be offloaded, while these more complex and perhaps more creative ones will develop very actively. And those people who see this, and those who will help create them as well, because you're also talking about community-based marketing and branding, right? These are also, I think, the very directions that you have.
Well, again, community is really that same close circle, like that very village where you can trust everyone. Essentially, it's the same demand for trust.
Yes. You do branding, for example. I'd really like to learn a bit more from you because your workshops consistently turn out to be very, very structured and incredibly clear. You help people reach these kinds of insights, right? Let's talk about how to effectively find those specific differences we've been discussing. How do you actually pinpoint and locate them? Do you have any kind of mechanism for that?
How to find your
Yes.
your own identity, your own authenticity. For example, my mind goes to the word selfhood.
Yes.
Right. On the one hand, it's about authenticity. But on the other hand, it also means that you are the most something, the most yourself. And here it's like, on the one hand, it's what sets you apart, and on the other hand, it's what you are best at. And I think these are related parameters, because when we are all in some kind of competitive environment, whether it's our business in a competitive environment, or the people around me are in a competitive environment, it doesn't matter. You have this specific evening, a Friday night, and you're thinking about where to spend it. There are several competing
Podcasts?
podcasts, friends, acquaintances, wine bars, whatever. These are all competing options. We are always in a situation of competition. And here it seems to me, on the one hand, there's a certain pressure because we're always making choices, right? We'll go to one particular bar, we'll listen to one particular podcast at a given time, right? And you truly need to be the one that people consistently choose to go to. But on the other hand, it's almost as if this is a kind of significant pressure. That is, if you're not first, then you're second, and no one really knows who you are anymore. Who remembers who came in fourth at the Olympics? Exactly. So on the one hand, it's certainly a lot of pressure, but on the other hand, I always think to myself, what exactly is the good news here? The truly good news is that our inherent authenticity in an increasingly open world where everything is absolutely saturated with vast information flows, in this expansive open world, our truly unique qualities, perhaps even something a little bit strange or wonderfully quirky about us, will definitely be genuinely needed or profoundly interesting to someone out there. And that's precisely why the average, generic, and utterly uninspired story is becoming progressively less and less interesting to a discerning audience. And so I think in order to find that authenticity, whether it's for your business, your product, your personal brand, or yourself, you need to really look at your unique quirks, your truly distinctive traits, the specific things that genuinely set you apart. And by deeply digging into that, sometimes, of course, you absolutely need outside help for this, because to ourselves, we never seem strange at all. Everything just feels completely natural and entirely organic. But if you look from the outside, people might say, well, you're definitely unique in this particular way.
He used to be considered strange.
Yeah, we recently created a course on personal branding, and there's a great exercise in it. My friend Yulia Berlakova brought it in. I specifically invited her because I realized that when it comes to branding, I can more or less extract the key idea from any business. But with a person, it's not that easy, and that's when I needed help from specialists. I invited a coach, and she brought a really great exercise called 16 associations. First, you write down 16 words that you associate with yourself, then you synthesize a new word from the first two, another from the third and fourth, and so on, so you end up with 8. Then from those 8, you get 4, from 4 you get 2, and finally, you're left with a single word. And just yesterday, yes. And you genuinely think it's just a simple classic technique, but literally just yesterday I had this particular course and people were absolutely shocked. They saw their final completed word and they were truly like, I don't even fully understand how this is actually me. Yeah. And then I show them, look, we've been discussing your personal brand for 2 full days and here it truly is. This specific word, this particular quirk of yours, it's right here, and right here. And people say, oh, how is that possible?
Misha, what kind of artificial intelligence is this? Seriously, it really doesn't work because there's no synergy, no energy from people, right? I mean, it can automate things. It can ask you questions like a psychologist, like a coach. It can ask you questions from any test. But that kind of synergy just doesn't happen because something interesting is born when you interact person to person.
I'd like to somehow sum up what we've been
philosophizing about.
To sum up our intellectual wanderings together, we have explored many fascinating concepts.
To come back down to earth.
Yes, to land somewhere. I want to leave here and maybe guide our viewers in the same direction and pose a question that we'd like to reflect on afterwards. Because I truly think the most valuable thing, for me, at least in the realm of podcasts, isn't necessarily what people actually say, but rather the profound thoughts they inspire within me, the ones I'll genuinely reflect upon much later. So, let's try to thoughtfully answer a significant question. Allow me to ask you this directly. What do you personally think is truly worth reflecting on this particular year? Perhaps some kind of underlying, deeply considered thought to genuinely try on for yourself and truly live with for a significant while.
For me or for everyone in general? For me, personally. And I think that Well, what exactly should I be thinking about in this particular moment at this very instant?
What do you want to think about?
What do I want to think about?
Or what are you already thinking about, perhaps, maybe?
I truly think, therefore I indeed am. I could thoughtfully contemplate a good book.
A book?
No, actually, I'm really thinking about how when you reach a certain age or level of professionalism, at some point you feel like you actually have something to say to people and you don't really need to make anything up. Something just starts to flow through you. Not when you do it for your personal brand, but simply because you can't not do it. So I'm just thinking, how can I share my own personal experience, my perspective on the world? Honestly, in what format, right? Because I really, truly, and genuinely do not want to do it like everyone else, since it could just get completely lost and overlooked that way. And that's precisely why, for example, even though I do help some people with various things like effectively managing their social media presence or their overall reputation and so on and so forth, when it comes to myself, I definitely run into significant difficulties too, and I absolutely do not want to do it the exact same way as everyone else. Well, for instance, just constantly posting a million utterly pointless reels and diligently following some generic guide every single day and so on and so forth, right?
Why don't you want,
Well, it just feels like it's all going to waste down the drain.
again, just regular, ordinary content?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of truly interesting and significant things happen to me in my life, but if I don't feel completely ready and fully prepared to openly share them with others, I honestly just don't share them at all. So I patiently wait until what has happened to me somehow naturally turns into a more compelling and engaging story, or perhaps it leads to some genuinely interesting and impactful result. There really has to be some kind of strong internal impulse for it all to genuinely come together and make sense, right?
I think your word is impulse.
My word, yes, impulse. Yes, exactly. It's my word too. Yeah, everyone says that I am. But there's also the word impulsor in Spanish. It's like an inspirer, initiator, or founder as well, right? So, I mean, I also really like to look for something genuinely new and exciting to help launch some significant projects and so on and so forth. Well, that's probably what I'm thinking about quite a bit right now too.
What will your book be called?
Impulse?
Yes.
Somehow today our truly fascinating topic is all about books.
Well, you brought it up.
This is a supplementary edition to the podcast titled Flying Heads, specifically Volume 1.
Yes. Check out the link in the description. In 7 years, when we finish writing our books.
No, but I still think it'll happen sooner than that.
This year?
We could make a public agreement and then we'd have absolutely no way out.
That's the heads flying?
We can just bump into it with our noses like this.
Well, I mean, to think about it. So what I heard is that your idea is about thinking, and maybe our other viewers would also find it interesting to think about what they'd like to share with others. You really do want to share?
Yeah, to enrich artificial intelligence. To upload it so that
Its main problem now is that it's run out of data. It needs new data.
Yeah, that's why we need mavericks. We need new kinds of people who will turn everything upside down, explain things, and
Yeah.
bring some benefit.
To think about what you want to share, what else you want to contribute, how to enrich, if not artificial intelligence, then at least the noosphere.
Yes. See, the noosphere is already much closer, right? It's quite evident.
Artificial intelligence is basically a digitized noosphere as a whole, right? And I guess, I want to think about the question we touched on earlier. In what way are you strange? I think that's a question everyone should ask themselves. How are you strange? And I think there's a really good follow-up question. In what way am I strange, and what do people get out of it? Because that's how we approach, and how we approach brands as well. Okay, you have some kind of unique thing, your own special quirk, but what do I get out of it? And a brand works when you have something interesting, some kind of idea, some value that resonates with you, and at the same time it's something useful for you. That's it. And these two components.
But that's exactly what people pay attention to. They don't notice what's flat and smooth. They notice the counterpoints, the rough edges. They notice what sets the rhythm apart, right? And in general, for a person in any field, it's the events, the happenings that are interesting. That's actually what worries me a little in this regard. Maybe, of course, our facial expressions were good, right? So basically, we've actually lowered the eventfulness of our podcast right now.
We'll add quite a bit of eventfulness in post-production. Then we'll also try to cut it to reduce the eventfulness.
I see. There will be a lot of humor, and that will make up for the lack of eventfulness. Because if nothing is happening, if there's nothing going on, people just aren't interested at all, really. They completely lose interest.
Yeah, well, that's precisely why essentially something significant has to be happening. And what do I get out of it happening?
It doesn't matter. Why do people love negative news so much? It's always like someone got killed or, I don't know, some accident happened. It's about safety. It's the same thing, exactly the same. So if they know about some quirk you have, maybe the same evolutionary mechanism will kick in, but they'll get satisfaction from the fact that now they know how to deal with this oddity.
One possible answer to the question, what do I get out of it? Right.
Yeah, but we started throwing out ideas.
Yes. Well, what I mean is that this is a question that I want to think about. This is one of the answer options.
And what exactly are you truly thinking about right now during our podcast? Let me throw you the word alla verdi.
Alla verdi? That's what I'm saying. Here's a question I still want to think about. In what way am I strange, and what do people get out of this?
Not sure what makes you weird?
I think this is a question that can be answered quickly. It will be useful, and it will also be worth thinking about. That's also interesting.
But here, the question immediately arises, what is truth, really?
And I think it's really great that we've shifted to another topic, which I find very interesting. Yeah, that's because through trust, we've come to the idea that people truly trust something that is genuine. And what's truly genuine is some of your own inherent roughness, some of your unique individuality, some of your distinctive quirks. Yeah, and so that this quirkiness doesn't just float around somewhere in space. I think it's good to complement it with those who might find it interesting and to consider what benefit might come from that quirkiness.
I'll still stand by the idea that you can't trust anyone.
How are you going to stand your ground if your head is floating in space?
See, you interrupted me. You can't trust anyone. But what I meant was you can't trust anyone with the right to define what's true and what's authentic, right? Because, well, even, the state, public organizations, right? So you really need to keep training that inner tuning fork all the time? I mean, it seems to me that people who have that tuning fork, who have feelings, they'll be in a safer space. They don't delegate. They have a kind of sovereign state of being. Well, because, for example, you know that this labeling of eco-friendly products and so on, it doesn't actually guarantee that there are no pesticides in the labeled products. There are just fewer of them. But many people think there are no pesticides at all, right? They just haven't looked into the details of all this certification and so on, right? So to speak, right? And they can, create some kind of illusion for themselves, right? Or, there are many such examples. If you dig deeper, there's really nothing you can fully trust, not even the supposedly best things. That's precisely why this crucial measure of trust is something we absolutely shouldn't delegate to anyone else. And truly, to create this vital circle, a secure and supportive circle of people with whom you can genuinely go through life, from whom you can continuously learn, and with whom you can thoughtfully build certain shared and fundamental values.
So, the additional and crucial questions we strongly suggest our viewers carefully consider are: who exactly can you truly trust in this complex world? And where precisely is the definitive boundary of your personal trust in other individuals?
By the way, maybe it's worth it for everyone right now to actually write down who they trust. Maybe brands, organizations, people sort of conduct, an audit of trust.
Of trust, yes. Because in the end, you bring the responsibility for making decisions about trust back to yourself. So it's not automated for you. You don't just see a label and automatically trust it. You actually think, do I trust this label or not? And that, accordingly...
I think it's time to grow up. That's a mature stance. It doesn't mean you have to kill your inner child or anything. It should be preserved, but it should have its own adult self who helps it navigate this world.
So what is growing up then? What does it mean?
Growing up is truly about discovering and finding yourself.
I think that I absolutely agree with that. And I think it's also about taking responsibility for yourself.
In every sense of the word, right? So that's why when someone puts some kind of a label on something, do you just trust it implicitly? I wouldn't take it. I truly wouldn't.
That's irresponsibility.
No, it's more like a reference point. You accept it for yourself. It's just a kind of guideline for you. It's like you said, decathlon, it's convenient, it's good, okay? I turn a blind eye to the fact that they might be exploiting someone. But in this context, for me, it's fine. That's my adult position. I'm not blaming decathlon for this.
That they lured you in?
Yes, they truly lured me in. They completely deceived me and so on. See, and any person who sort of delegates this significant responsibility to others and says, oh, the politicians have truly deceived me, or I voted for him because he generously gave me 1,000 euros, and so on. Well, this rather infantile position in the end gives fertile ground for manipulation by people, bad people, truly evil people who absolutely cannot be trusted. You should always trust good people.
And not trust the bad ones?
A party popper indeed.
We talked about the important topic of trust and realized that our discussion has shifted a little bit in another direction. Today, our floating heads will not be against the blurring of trust, but rather against ordinariness and in favor of truly finding your authentic self. Because it seems that trust somehow arises from this,